I was standing in my kitchen, holding a grocery bag like it was evidence at a trial, because inside it was a crumpled receipt that did not belong to us. It was for 2 hotel keycards, a bottle of sparkling water, and a late-night snack tray, paid at 1:47 a.m. And the name on the receipt was not mine. It was his. And before I even said the name out loud, I already knew the biggest reveal was going to be uglier than the paper in my hand. Because my wife had been acting like a person who was borrowing her own life, smiling too late, texting too fast, and calling it work. I should explain how I found it. Because it was not some dramatic spy thing. It was just normal marriage clutter. The kind you stop noticing until it tries to tell you the truth. She asked me to grab her gym bag from the trunk. I did. I lifted the bag. It felt heavier than leggings and a water bottle, and the side pocket spit out the receipt like it was tired of lying. I stared at it while the fridge hummed like it wanted to change the subject. Then I folded it and walked upstairs, calm on the outside. Because I have always believed in dignity. Even when my heart wants to throw a tantrum like a toddler in a candy aisle, my wife, Mara, was in the bathroom, curling her hair. The mirror light made everything look too bright. Like the world had turned up its own contrast. I leaned on the doorframe and said, "I found this in your bag." And I watched her eyes first, because eyes tell the truth before mouths can build a story. Her pupils tightened for a second. Then she smiled like a customer service rep who just got yelled at for something she definitely did. She said, "What is that?" Like the paper might start introducing itself. I held it up. Hotel receipt. 2 key cards. Your ex-boyfriend name. And when I said his name, Vince, her shoulders did the tiniest flinch. The kind you miss if you do not already suspect the room is full of lies. She laughed once, too sharp. Then she said, "That is not what you think." And I almost respected the confidence, not because it was convincing, but because it was bold, like watching someone try to juggle knives while insisting it is a safe hobby. I kept my voice even. I said, "I do not know what to think yet. Tell me what it is." She stepped closer, hand reaching like she wanted to take the receipt and erase it. She said, "Vince asked me to drop something off for him. He is struggling. He had nowhere to go. He used the hotel for a meeting. I was just helping." And I stared at her. Because I knew Vince, I had met him once at a street festival years ago. He had that slick charm that makes you want to check your wallet. He wore a watch that looked expensive and a smile that looked borrowed. He talked fast about big plans and bigger wins. And my friend Nate later leaned in and said, "That guy is allergic to real jobs." I did not say that part out loud. I just said, "Why would a hotel charge for 2 key cards?" She blinked. Then she answered like she had been waiting for a different question. She said, "You are turning this into something." I said, "I am reading what is printed, Mara." She moved past me and walked into our bedroom, like distance could rewrite reality. I followed, not angry, not loud, just steady. Because if you raise your voice in a moment like that, you do not win. You just give your pain a microphone. She sat on the edge of the bed and started talking faster, about how Vince was in trouble, about how he begged her for help, about how she felt guilty because she once loved him. And that line, "once loved him," landed in my chest like a heavy book. I said, "You have been hiding things, you have been leaving at odd hours, and now I find this, and you expect me to accept a charity errand." She stared at her hands like they were going to write her a better excuse, and then she said, "Do you want to see my phone?" And I almost laughed, because when someone offers you their phone after you already found proof in the wild, it is usually because they have already cleaned the scene. But I said yes. She unlocked it and handed it over, and the first thing I noticed was how empty her messages looked, like a house staged for sale. Neat, polite, and soulless. No long threads, no messy jokes, no real life, just little fragments. And that is when a micro twist slid in like a draft under a door. Because at the top of her screen, there was a notification banner that vanished the second I saw it. But I caught enough, V. You promised you would not tell him. My thumb hovered. I said, "Where is Vince's contact?" She swallowed. Then she said, "I do not have him saved," I said. "So you are helping him. meeting him, and you do not have him saved. She tried to smile again. It did not reach anywhere useful. I opened the call log, nothing. I opened messages, nothing. Then I opened her deleted messages folder. Because yes, I know where it is. And what I found was a trail of missing hours. Gaps that looked like someone had been vacuuming the truth. And right then my phone buzzed. It was Nate. And the timing was so perfect, it felt like the universe was done whispering. I answered. And Nate said, "Hey man, quick question. Did you send Vince money? Because he is telling people you did." And my brain went cold. Mara froze like her body forgot how to pretend. I said, "What are you talking about?" Nate said, "I ran into him near the card room downtown. He was bragging. Said your wife is back in his corner. Said you are covering his losses." I did not even respond right away. Because I was watching Mara try to hold her face in place, like it was a mask slipping off. I ended the call and looked at her. And she whispered, "It is not like that." And I said, "Okay, then show me the bank account." Her head snapped up, anger flashed, then fear tried to hide behind it. She said, "Why are you interrogating me?" I said, "Because something is wrong, and it is either you tell me now, or I will find it anyway." She stood, walked to her dresser, opened a drawer, and pulled out a little envelope. "The kind you keep old photos in." She handed it to me, and inside was a second receipt. This one for a wire transfer, not from me, from her, $5,000, sent to a name I did not recognize. But the memo line said, "For Vince." And I looked up, and Mara finally stopped acting. Her voice dropped, and she said, "Please do not make me the villain." And that was the moment I realized she had already picked a side. She just wanted me to help her pretend she had not. And I said, "Tell me everything. Right now." And she opened her mouth. Then her phone rang, and the screen lit up with one word that turned my stomach. "Vince." And she did not answer. She just stared at it like it was a leash she could not pretend was not there. And I knew whatever came next was going to change my life. Whether she spoke or not, Mara let the phone ring until it died. Like silence could cancel a person. Then she picked it up and flipped it face down on the dresser. Her hands were shaking, but her voice tried to stay smooth. She said, "He is just calling because he is stressed." I said, "No, he is calling because you trained him to believe you will answer." And that was the first time she looked at me like she was seeing a stranger in her own house. I was not yelling. I was not dramatic. I was simply done being confused. She took a breath and started her story again. Same ingredients, different plating. She said Vince was drowning in debts, that he had been threatened, that she was scared something bad would happen, and she did not want to be the reason. She said she had only helped with money, only met him to hand things off, never anything more. And she said it in that careful tone people use when they want you to focus on the words instead of the gaps between them. I walked past her and sat on the edge of our bed. The mattress dipped like it was tired too. I said, "You have a wire receipt, a hotel receipt, and a notification that said you promised you would not tell me. And Nate says he is telling people I am paying his losses. So explain how all of that is innocent." Mara crossed her arms, then uncrossed them. She was trying to find a pose that made her look believable. I said, "Unlock your phone again." She hesitated 1 second too long. Then she did it. And I did not go to the Messages app first. I went to her email, because people forget email. They delete texts like it is a magic trick. But receipts and confirmations, those are cockroaches. They survive. I searched Vince's name, and there it was. An email from a casino loyalty program. Subject line, "Your stay is confirmed." And under it, a reservation number for a room at the same hotel on the receipt. The guest name was Vince, but the contact email was Mara. I held the phone up, and she flinched again. I said, "Why is your email on his reservation?" She said, "He needed a contact. He does not have stable access." I said, "You sound like you are applying to be his legal guardian." She snapped. "Do you want me to be cruel?" I said. "I want you to be honest." She sat down on the vanity chair and rubbed her forehead. Then she said, "Okay, I met him." Yes, more than once. I helped him. Yes, I should have told you, and I am sorry. And she reached toward me like she wanted forgiveness to be a physical object she could take. But I leaned back. Not dramatic, just protective, I said. That still does not explain why 2 key cards. She went quiet. And I felt that heavy moment when you realize the next sentence will hurt. She said, I did not sleep with him. And the way she said it, too fast, too eager, told me that was the line she had been practicing in the car. I nodded slowly. I said, You did not answer my question. She stood again, pacing now. Because pacing is what people do when the truth is chasing them, she said. He is my past, okay? He knows things about me. He played on my guilt. He said if I did not help, he would tell everyone I ruined him. And I laughed once. Not because it was funny, but because it was ridiculous. I said, Mara, he ruined himself. He gambles, he lies, he borrows, he burns bridges, and you are calling that leverage. She turned on me, eyes sharp, and said, You do not understand. And I said, Then help me understand. And that is when another micro-twist hit, because my own phone buzzed again, and this time it was a bank alert, and I did not even have to open it to feel my pulse spike. I opened it anyway, and saw a scheduled transfer, $3,000, set to go out in the morning from our joint account to an account number I did not recognize. Scheduled by Mara at 2:06 a.m., the same night as the hotel receipt. I held my phone up, and she stopped pacing like someone hit pause. I said, You were not just helping him. You were moving our money, she whispered. I was going to replace it, I said. With what, your hope? She took a step toward me, voice breaking, and said, He said he would pay it back after one big win, and I stared at her. Because the phrase one big win is what gamblers use like a prayer, like a religion, like an excuse that never expires. I said, Cancel it now. She hesitated. And that hesitation was not about the banking app. It was about loyalty. I said it again, Cancel it. She did, fingers shaking. And then she looked up and said, You are acting like I betrayed you. And I said, Because you did. Even if you never touched him, you betrayed me with secrecy, with money, with choosing him over honesty. She opened her mouth to argue. Then her phone buzzed with a text, and I saw it from across the room, because she had the brightness too high, and the preview showed, Where are you? Bring the rest. She snatched the phone like it was a live wire, and I said, Who is that? She said. No one. I said, Funny. No one sounds demanding. She started crying then, real tears, messy, and I did not feel victorious. I felt tired. She said, I did not mean for it to become this. I said, What did you mean for it to become? Because you do not accidentally book hotel rooms and schedule transfers in the middle of the night. She shook her head. And finally, she said the truth in pieces. She said she ran into Vince at a gas station a month ago. She said he looked rough. She felt sorry. He said he was clean. He said he just needed a little help to get stable. She said she believed him because she wanted to believe she had not wasted those years with him. She wanted to believe she could turn her past into something good. She said she met him for coffee, then met him again. Then he started asking for money. Then he started saying people were after him. Then he started saying if she did not help, he would come to our house and explain everything to me. And she said she panicked. I listened, and a part of me almost sympathized, because panic makes people stupid. But another part of me remembered every time she looked me in the eyes and said work ran late. I said, You could have told me the first time he showed up. She said, I was ashamed. And I said, Shame is not an excuse for turning me into a stranger. She said, It was never about choosing him. It was about fear, I said. Fear does not book 2 key cards. And she went silent again. And the silence told me I was right. I stood up, walked to the closet, and pulled down the old storage box where we kept random paperwork. I did not even know why I went there. Instinct, maybe. But something told me there was more. And there was. Because inside was an envelope I had never seen, tucked under tax folders. and on it was Vince's handwriting. My name, my full name. Like a headline, my stomach dropped. I opened it, and inside was a folded note and another receipt. This one from a pawn shop, listing my grandfather watch, the one I thought was safe in my dresser, pawned 2 weeks ago. I turned and looked at Mara, and she did not deny it. She just started sobbing harder, and I said, "You took my watch," she choked out. "I was going to buy it back," I said, with one big win, and the sarcasm came out like armor. She sank to the floor, and I did not move to help her. Because at that moment I realized I had been living with someone who could dismantle our life piece by piece and still ask me not to call it betrayal. I said, "We are done." She looked up, eyes red, and whispered, "Please," and I said, "I am not going to compete with a man who treats people like chips on a table. You can keep your fear. You can keep your secrets, but you cannot keep me." And she said, "Where am I supposed to go?" And I answered honestly, "Somewhere you cannot steal from me." Then my phone rang. "Unknown number," I answered, and a man said my name like he knew it well, and he said, "You do not know me, but you have a problem. Vince owes my boss money, and your name is in his mouth," and the line went dead. And Mara stared at me like she had just realized the mess was not just emotional, it was bigger. And I looked back at her and said, "You brought him to our door, and now you are going to see what that costs." I stood there with my phone still hot in my hand. The unknown caller had a voice like a customer service survey. Calm, polite, and somehow worse because of it, Mara whispered. "Who was that, like she did not already know?" I said. "Someone who thinks Vince's debts are now a group project." She tried to grab my arm. I stepped back. Not to be cruel, just to keep my space, because if I let her touch me, then I might soften. And soft was how we got here. I walked downstairs, opened my laptop at the kitchen counter, and logged into our banking. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I needed to know what else was bleeding. Mara hovered behind me, silent, like a kid waiting outside a principal's office. I scrolled, and my stomach tightened. Small withdrawals, cashback, gift cards. The kind of transactions that look harmless until you add them up. Then one charge caught my eye. A storage unit, paid monthly. Not ours. I clicked details. The unit was across town. I looked at Mara, she went pale. I said, "What is in the storage unit?" She shook her head. I said, "Do not lie again." She swallowed and said, "Vince stuff. He needed a place." I laughed once because of course he did. I said, "You rented a secret storage unit for your ex while stealing my watch and moving our money, and you want me to believe nothing happened?" She started crying again, and I felt my patience become a clean, sharp line. I said, "Give me the key code." She hesitated, then typed it into her notes app and showed me. And right as she did, her phone buzzed again. She looked, and I saw the name. Vince. She answered this time, and put it on speaker without meaning to. His voice slid into our kitchen like smoke. "Hey, babe, where are you?" Mara stammered. "Vince, I cannot." He cut her off. "Yes, you can. You said you would bring the rest." He paused, then added, "Or do I go talk to your husband myself?" I leaned closer to the phone and said, "Hi, Vince, it is me. You can talk to me now." There was a beat of silence. Then he laughed, light and fake. "Oh man, look at that." "The hero is home," I said. "You called my name into some stranger's mouth. You owe money. You stole my property through my wife, and you are done using my life like an ATM. Vince sighed like I was boring him. "Listen, this is not personal. It is just business," I said. "No, this is personal because you made it that way." He lowered his voice, suddenly sweet. "You seem like a smart guy. Smart guys solve problems, so here is the deal. You cover what she promised." I disappear. "Everyone is happy," Mara whispered. "Please do not." And that was the micro twist that punched me hardest. Because she did not say, "Please do not" to him. She said it to me, like she expected me to fix it. I took the phone from her and said, "You want a deal? Return my watch, close the storage unit, and never contact us again." Vince laughed again, louder. You do not get to set terms. Then he hung up, and the silence after felt heavy. Mara slid down onto a chair, shaking. I looked at the hotel receipt again, then at the storage unit info. And I realized the story was not just about cheating. It was about leverage. And I was missing the real piece. So I grabbed my keys and said, I am going to that unit. Mara stood fast, panic in her eyes, and she said, You cannot go alone. And I said, You should have thought of that before you turned our marriage into his hiding place. And I walked out. With the code in my pocket and a new rule in my head, I was done being surprised. The storage place smelled like hot dust and old cardboard. The manager barely looked up when I said the unit number, like secrets were normal here. I typed the code, the lock clicked, and when I rolled up the door, I did not find boxes of clothes or some sad couch. I found my life, my missing tools, my spare laptop, a sealed envelope with my name, and a stack of casino markers. The kind that screamed debt without making a sound. My jaw tightened. Because this was not Mara helping an ex. This was Vince building an exit plan using my stuff. I opened the envelope. Inside was a printed document, a fake promissory note, claiming I owed Vince $20,000, with a scribbled signature that tried to look like mine. I took a photo, then another, then I heard my phone buzz. Nate. I answered. He said, Dude, I just saw Vince at Rio's card room. He is telling people you are his partner, and he flashed a paper, like proof. I looked at the fake note in my hand and said, I have it. Nate swore under his breath, then said, Do not go home yet, I said. I was not planning to because right then I saw something in the corner of the unit, a small camera, pointed straight at the door, recording whoever came in, and the red light was on, meaning Vince knew I was here. And he wanted to watch what I touched. I kept my face calm for the camera, because if Vince wanted to show I was not giving him fear, I unplugged the camera and set it in a box like it was junk. Then I moved fast. I grabbed my laptop, my tools, the envelope, and every marker receipt I could find. I took photos of everything first, dates, names, amounts. Then I rolled the door down and walked out like I was leaving a gym. My phone buzzed again, unknown number, same polite voice, he said. You are at the unit, I said. And you are creeping on cameras like that is normal, he chuckled, still polite. You found the paper? Yeah, I said. I also found the camera and the markers and my stolen property. He paused, then said, You can make this easy, or you can make it messy? I said, It is already messy. I'm just cleaning my side. He lowered his voice. Here's the simple version. Vince needs to settle. You are the name he gave, so you pay. I said no. The name he gave is a lie, and I have proof. He sighed like I was wasting his afternoon, then said, You have until tonight. And hung up. I stood in the parking lot. Sunlight too bright for what was happening, and I realized the twist was bigger than my marriage. This was a setup, and Mara was either a victim, a willing helper, or both. I drove straight to the pawn shop, because my watch was not just a watch. It was my line in the sand. The clerk checked a drawer and said, Sold last week, I asked. To who? He shrugged. Cash buyer, no info. And my stomach dropped again. Because Vince did not just take, he erased. I sat in my car and called Mara. She answered on the first ring, voice small. I said, Your ex forged my signature, rented a unit in our name and recorded it, and now strangers are calling me for his debt, she whispered. I did not know about the forgery, I said. What did you know? She went quiet, then said, He said he needed something to scare his creditors, just until he won. I laughed, sharp, and said, You believed the same fairy tale again? Then she said, Please just tell me what to do. And I said, For once, do not do anything. Tell me where he is. And she answered, Rio's card room. And I said, Stay away from him. I am ending this, with or without your help. Rios smelled like cheap coffee and false confidence. I walked in and saw Vince across the room, smiling like he owned oxygen. He froze when he saw me, then lifted his hands like we were friends. I stepped close and said, "Your forgery is in my pocket, your camera is in my trunk, and your story ends tonight." He leaned in and whispered, "You cannot prove anything." I smiled and said, "I do not need to prove it to you. I just need to show it to the right people." His eyes flicked toward the exit, then back to me, and for the first time his charm looked scared. Vince tried to laugh it off. Then his phone buzzed and his face changed, because whatever was on his screen was louder than his ego. He stood fast, and I said, "Sit down." He did not. So I slid the photos and the fake note onto the nearest security desk. Then I called the non-emergency line right in front of him. Calm voice, clear facts, stolen property, forged document, surveillance camera in a rented unit, a debt setup using my name. Vince backed away, eyes darting, and I just watched. Because chasing was his game, not mine. Later, Mara showed up at my door looking wrecked and shaking, saying he had been controlling her life. I listened. Then I said, "You made your choice. Now take responsibility for it without me." And I closed the door. Not out of hate, but out of respect for my future. The next week, my account was clean, my name was cleared, and the quiet in my house finally felt honest.